The galaxy had known peace for 3,000 years, and the secret to that peace was simple. Leave the Death World alone. Every species in the Galactic Concord knew the stories about Sol 3, the nightmare planet that orbited a yellow star in a forgotten corner of the spiral arm. And those stories had been passed down through generations like warnings whispered to children before sleep. The planet was a Class 12 hellscape, the highest danger rating possible, and the conditions there were so extreme that most species could not survive. Even a single hour on its surface, the gravity was crushing, nearly 10 times stronger than what most civilized races considered comfortable, and the atmosphere was filled with oxygen, a gas so reactive that it could burn through metal and destroy living tissue from the inside. Water fell from the sky in great torrents that the natives called rain. And this same liquid covered most of the planet in vast oceans that could swallow entire continents. The ground itself was unstable, shifting and cracking in events called earthquakes, and mountains would sometimes explode with fire and molten rock in displays of violence that defied imagination. Diseases spread through the air and water, invisible killers that evolved as quickly as any cure could be developed. And the native life forms spent their entire existence locked in an endless war for survival. Every creature on that world was a predator or prey, and often both at the same time. The species that rose to dominance there called themselves humans, and their very existence was considered impossible by galactic scientists. No intelligent life should have been able to evolve under such conditions. And yet the humans had not only survived but thrived. They had conquered their deadly world through pure stubborn refusal to die. Counselor Vareth of the Veshan Dominion had heard all these stories, and he considered them to be nothing more than primitive superstition designed to keep lesser species afraid. He was old and powerful, having served on the Galactic Concord for nearly 2 centuries. And in all that time, he had never seen evidence that humans were anything special. They were small and fragile, with soft skin and weak bones. And they had only achieved interstellar travel within the last century compared to the ancient races of the galaxy. They were infants stumbling through the darkness when his survey fleet discovered the human research station orbiting Kepler 442b. Vareth saw an opportunity that was too good to ignore. The station was tiny, barely more than a collection of metal tubes floating in the void. And his sensors detected only 37 life signs aboard, 37 scientists with no military escort, no defensive weapons, and no way to call for help before his jammers blocked their communications. The planet below was rich in rare minerals that the Veshan Dominion needed, and the humans had no legal claim to the system under Concord law. Taking the station would be easy, and the humans were too weak to do anything about it. Vareth gave the order to attack without hesitation his flagship. The dominant will led a fleet of 15 warships toward the station, and the humans did not even attempt to flee. They simply watched as the Veshan vessels surrounded them, their primitive sensors no doubt struggling to comprehend the advanced technology bearing down on them. The first boarding pods launched from the dominant will and struck the station's hull with a sound like thunder. Veshan soldiers poured through the breaches, their weapons raised and ready, expecting to find cowering scientists begging for mercy. Instead, they found Dr. Sarah Chun standing in the main corridor with a fire extinguisher in her hands. She was a small woman with gray hair and lines on her face that spoke of decades spent in deep space. And she should have been terrified. The Veshan soldiers towered over her, their scaled bodies covered in combat armor, and any rational being would have surrendered. Immediately, Sarah Chun swung the fire extinguisher into the lead soldier's face with enough force to crack his helmet. The corridor exploded into chaos as the other scientists joined the fight, using tools and equipment as improvised weapons against the invaders. They were hopelessly outmatched, and they knew it. But they fought anyway. Varaith watched the feeds from his command chair with growing irritation. These humans were supposed to be weak and cowardly. Yet they were making his elite soldiers work for every meter of ground. He ordered more troops deployed and settled back to wait for the inevitable conclusion. In the station's communication center, a young technician named James Park was bleeding from a wound on his head as he worked frantically at his console. The Deshan jammers were blocking all standard frequencies. But James had spent 3 years studying alien communication technology, and he knew things that the Deshans did not expect a human to know. He found a gap in their jamming field, a tiny window that would only stay open for a few seconds. And he activated the station's emergency distress beacon. The signal burst out into space, carrying coordinates and a simple message: humans under attack. Send help. The jamming field closed around the gap almost immediately. But it was too late. 4.7 seconds had passed, and the signal was already racing toward Earth at faster than light speed. Sarah Chun saw the confirmation light on her personal communicator, a tiny green flash that told her the beacon had transmitted successfully. And she smiled despite the blood running down her face. The Deshan soldiers had pushed her team back to the central hub, and there was nowhere left to retreat. She looked out the observation window and saw a maintenance shuttle sitting in the external dock, its engines still warm from a supply run earlier that day. The shuttle was small and unarmed, but it was fast. And Sarah Chun had not survived 40 years of deep space exploration by giving up when things looked hopeless. She ran. The Deshan soldiers fired after her, but she was already through the airlock, her fingers flying across the shuttle's controls as she brought the engines. Online Vareth saw the shuttle launch on his tactical display and laughed at the futile escape attempt. His point defense systems would destroy the tiny vessel before it traveled 100 meters, but Sarah Chun was not trying to escape. She aimed the shuttle directly at the dominant will sensor array and pushed the throttle to maximum. The shuttle struck the flagship at full speed, tearing through the delicate equipment and sending debris spinning into space. Sarah Chun died on impact, but she died with a smile on her face. She had bought her people 4.7 seconds, and she knew that would be enough. Vareth stared at the damage reports with fury burning in his heart. The human woman had destroyed his primary sensors and killed herself in the process. And for what? A distress signal that would take months to reach anyone who might care? He did not understand what he had just witnessed, and that failure of understanding would cost him everything. The remaining scientists were captured and brought to the detention level, where they were questioned about their research and their pathetic attempt at resistance. They said nothing useful. But Vareth noticed something strange in their eyes. They were not afraid. They were waiting. Vareth dismissed this observation as wishful thinking on their part and turned his attention to claiming the planet below. He had won. After all, the humans were his prisoners. Their station was destroyed, and no help was coming. He was certain of this. He was wrong. The signal traveled through subspace at speeds that defied normal physics, crossing the vast emptiness between stars in mere hours instead of the years that light would require. It passed through regions of space where no sentient being had ever ventured, through clouds of dust and gas that had existed since the birth of the universe. And it did not slow or weaken. The signal was small, barely more than a whisper in the cosmic background noise, but it carried the weight of 37 human lives. 17 hours after Sarah Chun crashed her shuttle into the Deshan flagship, the signal reached Earth deep beneath the Swiss Alps, in a facility that did not appear on any official map. A computer system that had been waiting for 63 years suddenly came to life. The facility was called the Sentinel, and its sole purpose was to listen for exactly this kind of message. Automated systems analyzed the signal and confirmed its authenticity within seconds. The encryption matched. The coordinates were verified. And the distress code was genuine. This was not a drill or a test or a false alarm. Humans were under attack, and they needed help. The Sentinels. Artificial intelligence began making calculations and sending notifications to a very specific list of individuals scattered across the planet. There were exactly 127 names on that list, and every single one of them had been chosen for their ability to make difficult decisions under impossible pressure. Admiral James Okonkwo was fishing on the coast of Lagos when his phone buzzed with a priority alert. He was 73 years old, with gray hair and deep wrinkles around his eyes, and he had spent the last decade pretending to be retired. The alert changed everything. He read the message twice, his weathered hands steady despite the weight of what he was seeing. And then he made a single phone call to a number that existed nowhere in any database. The voice that answered was young and eager, and had been waiting for this moment since the day she joined the service. Admiral, we received the signal. What are your orders? Okonkwo looked out at the peaceful ocean, knowing that the peace was about to end, and spoke two words that would change the course of galactic history. Wake them up, all of them, across Earth. Similar scenes played out in homes and offices and secret facilities, hidden from public view in Beijing. General Wei Huang closed the book he had been reading and walked calmly to a secure communication terminal that had been installed in his home 40 years ago in Moscow. Admiral Yekaterina Volkov kissed her grandchildren goodbye and told them she would see them soon, knowing that it might be a lie in Washington. Secretary of Defense Marcus Thompson ended a budget meeting early and disappeared into an elevator that officially did not exist in New Delhi. Fleet Commander Priya Sharma began activating sleeper protocols that had not been used since the early days of human space exploration in Sao Paulo. Captain Diego Santos called his crew from their civilian jobs and told them to report to a shipyard that the public believed had been decommissioned decades ago. The Galactic Concorde had observed humanity for 63 years, ever since the first human ships ventured beyond their home system and made contact with alien civilizations. They had watched the humans build a small fleet of exploration vessels and trading ships, and they had estimated human military strength at perhaps 100 vessels. This estimate was wildly, catastrophically wrong. Humanity had learned very quickly that the galaxy was not a safe place. The Concorde preached peace and cooperation, but the history of every species told the same story. The weak were conquered, and the strong survived. The humans had no intention of being weak, while their civilian ships traveled between stars, and their diplomats smiled at alien representatives. A different kind of construction was happening in the darkest corners of Earth's territory, deep in the Pacific Ocean, in underwater facilities built to withstand the crushing pressure of the Mariana Trench. Shipyards worked around the clock, producing vessels that no alien had ever seen. These were not exploration ships or trading vessels. These were warships, designed with a single purpose: to destroy anything that threatened humanity. The construction had begun in secret 50 years ago, and it had never stopped. Generation after generation of engineers and workers had dedicated their lives to building a fleet that they hoped would never be needed. The ships were hidden in asteroid fields and buried in the ice of distant moons and parked in the shadows of gas giants where no scanner could detect them. Their crews rotated through cryosleep, maintaining their skills through virtual simulations, while waiting for the day that their existence would finally be revealed. That day had come in the depths of the Pacific. Running lights flickered to life along hulls that had not moved in decades. The water churned and bubbled as massive engines began their warm-up sequences, and submarines designed for space rose from the trenches like ancient leviathans awakening from slumber. Crews emerged from cryobays with muscles stiff and minds sharp, their training taking over as they moved to their stations with practiced efficiency. They checked weapons that had never been fired outside of simulations, and ran diagnostics on systems that had been maintained in perfect condition for this exact moment, the Death World. Armada numbered 12,000 ships. There were battleships the size of small cities, bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. There were carriers housing thousands of smaller fighters, each one piloted by a human who had spent years preparing for combat. There were destroyers and cruisers and frigates, support vessels and medical ships and troop transport. It was the largest military force ever assembled by any single species in the history of the galaxy, and no one outside of Earth knew it existed. Admiral Okonkwo arrived at the fleet's command center 6 hours after the distress signal was received. The facility was located on the far side of Earth's moon, hidden from alien observation by billions of tons of rock, and it was filled with the most advanced technology humanity had ever created. Holographic displays showed the positions of every ship in the fleet, and officers moved between stations with urgent purpose. Okonkwo took his place at the command console and looked at the faces around him. They were young and old, men and women from every nation on Earth, united by a single cause. For 63 years, humanity had pretended to be harmless. They had smiled at their galactic neighbors and traded fairly and followed the rules. They had endured condescension and dismissal and the quiet assumption that they were too primitive to matter. They had done this because they knew the truth that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was patient. And now someone had made the mistake of attacking their people. Okonkwo activated the fleet-wide communication system and spoke words that every human crew member had been waiting their entire lives to hear. All ships. This is Admiral Okonkwo speaking. We have received a confirmed distress signal from the Kepler 442b research station. Our people are under attack by forces of the Veshan Dominion. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over his crews, and then continued. For 60 years, we have hidden in the shadows. We have watched and waited and prepared for this day, hoping it would never come, but knowing that it would. The galaxy forgot what we are, and today, we remind them. 12,000 ships powered their engines to full capacity. We are the children of Earth, the death world that should have killed us. We survived ice ages and supervolcanoes and extinction events that would have destroyed any other species. We fought our way to the stars through pure determination and stubborn refusal to die. Navigation systems locked onto the coordinates from the distress signal, and now someone has threatened our family. Our scientists, our brothers and sisters who went into the darkness seeking knowledge. They think we are weak. They think we will not come. They think the old stories about the death world are just myths and legends. Subspace drives began to spin up, tearing holes in the fabric of reality. They are about to learn how wrong they are. The Death World Armada vanished from Earth's orbit in a flash of light that was visible from the surface below. They were coming. Counselor Virith was having a very productive day. His soldiers had finished securing the human research station and were now transferring valuable equipment to his fleet. The prisoners had been processed and placed in detention cells aboard his flagship, and preliminary surveys of the planet below confirmed that it was rich in the minerals he had come to claim. Everything was proceeding exactly as he had planned. He sat in his command chair aboard the Dominant Wool, reviewing reports from his subordinates and imagining the praise he would receive when he returned home with such valuable prizes. The damage to his sensor array was annoying but not critical, and he had already sent a message to Veshan Command requesting replacement parts in a few weeks. No one would even remember the foolish human woman who had crashed her shuttle into his ship. The tactical officer at the sensor station made a strange sound, something between a gasp and a whimper, and Virith looked up with irritation. "What is it now?" The officer did not answer immediately. He was staring at his display with an expression that Vareth had never seen before on the face of a Theshan warrior. It looked almost like fear. "Counselor, you need to see this. There is something emerging from subspace, multiple contacts." Many multiple contacts. Vareth rose from his chair and walked to the sensor station, expecting to see perhaps a small human patrol that had stumbled upon his fleet by accident. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. Subspace was tearing open in 17 different locations around the system, each rupture glowing with the distinctive blue light of faster-than-light travel. Ships were emerging from those ruptures, ship after ship after ship, in numbers that his sensors struggled to count. The smallest of them was twice the size of his flagship. The largest was 3 kilometers long, a mountain of metal and weapons that blocked out the stars behind it. "That cannot be right," Vareth whispered. "Run the scan again." The tactical officer obeyed, his claws trembling as he worked the controls. And the results came back the same. 12,000 warships now surrounded the Theshan fleet, their weapons powered and ready, their formation so precise that it spoke of decades of practice. Vareth recognized none of the ship designs. The vessels were angular and brutal, built without any concern for elegance or grace. Their hulls covered in weapons arrays that his database could not identify. They looked like they had been designed by a species that expected to fight wars, not avoid them. A communication request flashed on his console, and Vareth accepted it with numb fingers. The face that appeared on his screen was human. An older male with dark skin and gray hair and eyes that held absolutely no fear. "This is Admiral James Okonkwo of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said in flawless Theshan. "You have attacked a human civilian installation. You have taken human prisoners. You have 17 minutes to return them unharmed and surrender your fleet unconditionally." Vareth stared at the screen for several seconds, his mind struggling to process what was happening. This was impossible. The humans had no military, no armada, no weapons that could threaten a species as advanced as the Theshans. "You dare threaten the Theshan Dominion?" Vareth found his voice and let anger fill it, pushing back against the cold fear spreading through his chest. "We command 1,000 worlds. We have subjugated dozens of species. You are nothing but primitives from a toxic rock." The human admiral did not react to the insult. His expression remained calm, almost bored, like a parent dealing with a misbehaving child. 16 minutes. 40 seconds. "You are one species," Vareth continued, his voice rising. "One primitive deathworld species that has barely learned to travel between stars. You cannot possibly stand against the might of the Theshan fleet." "Perhaps," Admiral Okonkwo said. And for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Something that made Vareth take an involuntary step backward. "You should consult your historical archives about what happens when Deathworld species are provoked." The Admiral leaned forward slightly, and his voice dropped to something that was almost a whisper. "We evolved fighting for survival every single day of our existence. Every predator, every disease, every natural disaster that your species has never experienced. We faced them all and we won. We did not reach space because it was easy. We reached space because we refused to die. And we will not let our people die here today." Vareth cut the transmission and turned to his officers. "All ships. Battle formation. We will show these primitives the price of threatening the Dominion." His fleet began to move. 15 warships arranging themselves into the attack pattern that had brought victory to the Theshans for over 1,000 years. It was a formation designed to maximize firepower while minimizing exposure. And it had never failed against any enemy. The human fleet did not move. They simply waited, their ships hanging motionless in the void, watching the Theshans prepare for battle with what almost looked like patience. Vareth took this as a sign of weakness. He believed the humans were frightened. that their show of force was nothing but a bluff designed to intimidate him into surrender. He was wrong on the bridge of the UEDF flagship, Unconquered. Admiral Okonkwo watched the Theshan fleet form up with something that might have been pity. They have no idea what they are facing. His tactical officer observed. No, Okonkwo agreed. They do not. And part of me regrets what we are about to do. Only part of you, sir? The Admiral thought about the distress signal. About 37 scientists who had been attacked without provocation. About Sarah Chun who had died buying them the seconds they needed to call for help. A very small part, he said. Status of the rescue teams? Standing by, Admiral. Marines are ready for deployment as soon as we secure space superiority. Okonkwo nodded and opened a channel to his entire fleet. All ships. This is the Admiral speaking. The enemy has chosen to fight. I want clean kills and precision strikes. We are here to rescue our people, not to prove a point. But if the Theshans want a demonstration of what humanity can do, we will give them one they will never forget. 12,000 ships acknowledge the order. Fire control. You may begin targeting solutions. Focus on their weapon systems first. Then engines. I want them disabled, not destroyed. We will need someone left alive to tell the rest of the galaxy what happened here today. The weapons officer smiled. A thin and predatory expression that would have sent chills down the spine of any alien who saw it. Understood. Admiral, targeting solutions locked. All weapons ready to fire on your command. The Wrath's fleet had almost completed their formation. The Theshan counselor was broadcasting demands and threats on all frequencies, apparently still believing that his fleet posed some kind of threat to the human armada. Admiral Okonkwo waited until the Theshans fired first. He wanted there to be no doubt about who had started this fight. No question about who was the aggressor and who was responding in defense. The Theshan weapons lanced out toward the human fleet. Energy beams and kinetic rounds designed to pierce shields and tear through hull plating. The unconquered shields absorbed the attack without even flickering. Is that the best they can do? The tactical officer asked. Apparently so, Okonkwo replied, and then gave the order that would change everything. All ships. Return fire. The Deathworld Armada opened up with weapons that the galaxy had never seen before. Technology that humanity had developed in secret over 50 years of quiet preparation. The Theshan fleet began to die. The first salvo from the Unconquered tore through 3 Theshan cruisers before their shields could fully activate. The weapons were something entirely new. A combination of directed energy and kinetic impact that bypassed traditional defensive systems. Like they did not exist. One moment the Theshan ships were there, proud and powerful and ready for battle. The next moment they were expanding clouds of debris and flame. Their crews dead before they even understood what had happened. The second salvo destroyed 4 more ships. The third salvo broke the Theshan formation. Entire Elivereth watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated around him. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds now dying in seconds against an enemy they had dismissed as primitive and weak. The tactical displays on his bridge showed nothing but red. Warning lights flashing and alarms screaming and damage reports flooding in faster than anyone could read them. How is this possible? He whispered. His officers had no answer. Theshan tactical doctrine was based on 3,000 years of warfare against species who viewed combat as a regrettable necessity. Civilized races who fought to negotiate rather than destroy. Their weapons were designed to disable enemy ships, to force surrender through demonstrated superiority, to win through intimidation rather than annihilation. Human weapons were designed with annihilation hundu. Completely different philosophy. They were designed. Kill the humans had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting for survival against predators and diseases and natural disasters. That made the Theshans look like pampered children. They had learned that when something threatened your existence, You did not try to negotiate with it, you destroyed it completely, and now they were applying that lesson. To the Deshin fleet commander Yuki Tanaka led a strike. Group of 12 destroyers straight through. The center of the Deshin formation, she was a small woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice. And she had spent 20 years training for exactly this kind of mission. Her ships were fast and maneuverable, designed for close-range combat where every second mattered. All units, follow my lead, she ordered. We punch through the middle and draw their fire away from the rescue teams. The destroyers accelerated to attack speed, weaving through the debris field that had once been Deshin warships. Enemy fire tracked toward them from multiple directions. Energy beams and missiles seeking to destroy the small human vessels before they could reach their targets. Tanaka's ship took a direct hit that killed 3 crew members and disabled one of her engines. She did not slow down. Damage report, she called out. Engine 2 is offline. Hull breach on deck 4 sealed. Weapon systems still operational. Then keep firing. The strike group tore through the Deshin center line like a blade through flesh, their weapons blazing in all directions as they engaged targets at point-blank range. 2 more destroyers died in the assault, their crews sacrificing themselves to create openings for their comrades. But for every human ship lost, a dozen Deshin vessels were destroyed. Tanaka emerged on the other side of the formation with her hull scarred and burning, her crew reduced by 40%, and a smile on her face. All hands, she announced over fleet-wide communications. We have people in there. Let us bring them home. While the main battle raged, a specialized team of assault shuttles approached the dominant will from multiple angles. These were not ordinary shuttles, but heavily armored troop carriers, designed to breach enemy hulls and deploy Marines directly into hostile territory. The Deshin flagship was wounded but not dead, its weapons still firing sporadically at any human ship that came too close. Admiral Okonkwo had given specific orders to disable rather than destroy, and his crews were following those orders with surgical precision. The shuttle carrying Sergeant Major Elena Rodriguez hit the flagship's hull at full speed, magnetic clamps engaging automatically as cutting torches began to burn. Through the armored plating, Elena was a large woman with arms like tree trunks and a voice that could cut through the chaos of battle. Without effort, she had been a Marine for 35 years, and she had never lost a single soldier under her command. She had no intention of starting today. Breach in 30 seconds, her technician reported. Internal scans show minimal resistance on the other side. Looks like they pulled most of their troops to the detention level. Then that is where we are going, Elena replied, checking her weapon one final time. Remember your training, watch your corners, and nobody dies today. The hull gave way and the Marines poured through, their boots hitting alien deck plating as they advanced in tight formation. Deshin soldiers appeared in the corridors ahead, their weapons raised and ready. But they were not prepared for what they faced. Humans fought differently than any species the Deshins had ever encountered. They did not hesitate or take cover or wait for opportunities. They attacked with a ferocity that seemed almost insane, pushing forward through enemy fire like the bullets could not touch them. Elena took a round to her shoulder and kept moving, her weapon never stopping its deadly rhythm as she cleared room after room behind her. Her Marines followed with the same relentless aggression, each one willing to die if it meant saving the prisoners they had come to rescue. The detention level was guarded by 50 Deshin soldiers, the best warriors the dominant will had to offer. The Marines went through them in less than 3 minutes. When Elena reached the cell block, she found something that made her stop in surprise. The human prisoners had already freed themselves. They had overpowered their guards using nothing but their bare hands and whatever objects they could use as weapons. And they had taken control of the entire level. Dr. Sarah Chan's assistant, a young woman named Maria Santos, was standing at the security console with a Deshan sidearm in her hand and blood on her face. "Took you long enough." Maria Sedalena laughed. A short and sharp sound that echoed off the metal walls. "You were supposed to wait for rescue." "We got tired of waiting." The battle in space was already ending by the time the prisoners were evacuated to the Unconquered. The Deshan fleet had been reduced to scattered debris and a handful of disabled ships. Their weapons silent and their engines dead. Councillor Varath had been captured trying to reach an escape pod. His guards killed by Marines who had no patience for those who attacked defenseless scientists. He was brought before Admiral Okonkwo in the flagship's detention center, his scales dull with shock and his eyes empty with defeat. 12,000 ships, Varath whispered. "Where did they come from? We watched you for 60 years. We never saw anything like this." Okonkwo looked at the alien who had started this war and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "You saw what we wanted you to see. You assumed that because we smiled and traded and followed your rules, we were harmless. You forgot the first lesson that every species should learn about the galaxy." He leaned close, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Never threaten a Death World species. We learned to be patient because our world taught us that survival requires planning, but we never stopped being what we are. And now you know the price of forgetting that lesson." Varath had no response. The Battle of Kepler-4 42b was over. Humanity had announced its true nature to the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. The Galactic Concord's emergency session convened within hours of the battle's conclusion. Representatives from 400 species gathered in the Great Chamber on the neutral world of Kethis Prime, their bodies ranging from the towering crystalline forms of the Volcari to the small furry shapes of the Mendith. They came from every corner of the galaxy, species that had never agreed on anything, united now by a single shared emotion: fear. The reports from Kepler-4 42b had spread through the communication networks like wildfire, each retelling, adding new details to the story. A Deshan attack fleet annihilated in minutes by weapons that should not exist. 12,000 human warships appearing from nowhere, their existence hidden for over half a century. Councillor Varath captured and humiliated, his flagship torn apart by creatures that the galaxy had dismissed as primitives. The chamber was filled with worried whispers and anxious movements as the representatives tried to understand what this meant for their own species. If humanity could hide such power for so long, what else might they be capable of if they could destroy a Deshan fleet so easily? Could any force in the galaxy stand against them? The great doors at the end of the chamber opened, and silence fell like a physical weight. Admiral James Okonkwo walked into the room alone, his uniform crisp and his bearing calm. He carried no weapons and had no escort. A single human among 400 species that had every reason to be afraid of him. He walked to the central platform where speakers addressed the assembly and looked around at the faces watching him with expressions ranging from terror to barely concealed hostility. "For 63 years, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space, "we have been your quiet neighbors. We traded fairly and honored every treaty. We asked only to be left in peace while we found our place in this vast and ancient civilization." He paused, letting his words settle over the assembly. "We did not seek war. We did not desire conquest. We wanted only to explore the stars and learn from the species who had traveled them long before us." A murmur ran through the crowd, representatives exchanging uncertain glances. "But we never forgot what we are. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day of our evolution. A world where the weak died and only the strong survived. That heritage is written in our genes and burned into our souls. And we will not apologize for it." The Deshan representative rose from his seat, his scales flushed with anger. You speak of heritage while your ships orbit a Theshan world with weapons armed. You speak of peace while my people's fleet drifts in pieces around Kepler 442b. This is naked aggression disguised as defense. Okonkwo turned to face the Theshan, and something in his expression made the alien take a step backward. Your fleet attacked an unarmed research station. Your soldiers killed a scientist named Sarah Chun because she fought back against an unprovoked assault. Your counselor ordered the capture and imprisonment of 37 civilians who had done nothing wrong. His voice hardened into something cold and sharp. We did not start this conflict, but we finished it, and we will finish any future conflict that threatens human lives in exactly the same way. The chamber erupted in protests and accusations, species shouting at each other and at the human admiral, who stood calmly in the center of the storm. It took several minutes for order to be restored. And when it was, a new voice spoke. The Kethari matriarch was the oldest living member of the Concord, a being who had seen empires rise and fall over 900 years of existence. When she spoke, everyone listened. The old warnings were not stories, she said, a voice like wind through ancient trees. They were prophecy, and we would do well to remember them. She rose from her seat and moved toward the central platform, her crystalline body catching the light as she walked. I was young when my people first encountered the records of Sol 3, young enough to be curious rather than afraid. I studied the planet and its dominant species. I read the accounts of their history and their wars and their endless struggle for survival. She stood beside Admiral Okonkwo and looked up at him with eyes that glittered like diamonds. I knew then what many of you are only learning now, that humanity is not a species to be feared because they are cruel or aggressive. They are to be respected because they endured. They survived a world that would have exterminated any other form of intelligent life. And that survival made them something unique in all the galaxy. She turned back to the assembly. The question before us is not whether humanity has the power to destroy us. That question has been answered. The question is whether we have the wisdom to live alongside them as equals rather than as potential enemies. The chamber fell silent once more. Admiral Okonkwo cleared his throat. We will continue to be your quiet neighbors, he said. We have no interest in empire or conquest. We want to trade and learn and grow just as we always have. But let this day serve as a reminder to any who might consider threatening human lives. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every species represented there. We are patient, but we are not passive. We are peaceful, but we are not weak. We will extend friendship to any who offer it sincerely, but we will respond to hostility with overwhelming force. This is not a threat. It is simply the truth of what we are. The vote that followed was unanimous. The Theshan Dominion was censured and required to pay reparations to Earth for the attack on Kepler 442b. Councillor Verath was stripped of his position and handed over to human authorities for trial, and a new clause was added to galactic law, written in clear language that left no room for misinterpretation. No species, for any reason, shall harm a citizen of Earth. In the years that followed, humanity remained exactly as they had always been. They smiled at their galactic neighbors and shared their music and their art. They traded fairly and honored their agreements. They sent scientists to study alien worlds and welcomed visitors to their own, but something had changed in the way other species looked at them. When humans entered a room, other beings made space for them. When humans spoke, others listened. It was not fear, exactly. Though there was certainly some of that, it was respect. The kind of respect that comes from understanding that the being beside you has survived things you cannot imagine. The galaxy had forgotten what it meant to come from a death world. Humanity had reminded them, and in doing so, they had earned their place among the stars, not as primitives struggling to keep up with their betters, but as equals who had proven their worth in the most fundamental way possible. They had survived, they had fought, they had won, and the old stories about the death world called Earth would be told for thousands of years to come, not as warnings anymore, but as celebrations of what a species could become when they refused to give up. Sarah Chun became a hero, her name spoken alongside the greatest figures in human history. The scientists she died protecting returned home to continue their research, their work ultimately leading to breakthroughs that benefited the entire galaxy. Admiral Okonkwo retired for real this time, spending his final years teaching young officers the lessons he had learned about the balance between strength and restraint. And somewhere in the vastness of space, on the bridge of a ship called the Unconquered, a new generation of humans looked out at the stars. They knew what their ancestors had endured. They knew what their species was capable of. And they knew that as long as they remembered those lessons, humanity would never face extinction again. The galaxy was vast and ancient and filled with wonders beyond imagination, and humanity was finally, truly, ready to explore it all.